Hello, good evening and welcome to this special edition of Ghana Connect, and it's brought to you by Star Ghana. It's live on Joy 99.7 FM and on the JoyNews channel on Multi-TV. In the next 24 hours, Ghana will join the rest of the world to mark the International Day of Democracy. The theme, Democracy and the Strain, Solutions for a Changing World, is remarkably relevant to us at this stage in our democracy. In the last few days, we have been forced to revisit the conversation about political vigilantism, political parties hiring thugs, sometimes armed, to guard both their own internal and external democratic elections. This, for many, is the biggest threat to Ghana's young democracy. NDC General Secretary JoyNews was heavily criticized after he made the following comments.
I endorse it fully as a proper response for the incalcitrance of the ruling government and their refusal to do anything about the vigilantes on the MPP side. You realize that for 2 years now, we have all been complaining about the rising incidence of vigilantism in this country. The president promises that something will be done and nothing gets done. Some of us have been affected by vigilante attack, and yet nobody had been held responsible as we speak to you now. And they are now in charge of the security services, and they still maintain party vigilantes terrorizing people left, right, and center, and all the security services are quiet. Even when you take steps to report, they don't take any action. So are you saying that we on the NDC side, because we are good citizens, we should keep quiet for MPP to control the army, to control the police, and to control everybody?
But that's not the way to go, General.
Please. So I, as a General Secretary, think that the appropriate response that will force the government and force civil society, force religious leaders, force traditional leaders to all let us come around one table to think about vigilantism. It's for people to take steps to defend themselves by also forming their vigilantes.
Oh, that's John Sasiru Nketia, who is the General Secretary of the NDC. Well, this week, former Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister Emmanuel Bombade was emphatic the best way to preserve the legacy of the late Kofi Annan is unite against political vigilantism.
Let's talk about Busumuru Kofi Annan home. What Busumuru Kofi Annan wants all of us to do, you and I, and every leader, whether you are a religious leader, a political leader, a social leader, a media practitioner, what he's asking us is that Ghana must be an example and continue to be the beacon of democracy and peace. The contradiction is we cannot do that when we are tolerant of vigilante groups in political parties, when there is rancor, hatred, division in our political competition, when people are prepared to divide in order to have political capital, when we are able to create conditions that are so intolerable and turn on you, the media, and blame you for the reason. So if we are celebrating his legacy, let's bring back into our politics respect for one another, decency in our politics, remove intolerance, remove vigilante groups, and respect one another.
Well, so tonight, as we herald the International Day of Democracy, we ask how real is the threat of political vigilantism to our democracy? Then later, what has happened to the constitutional review process after spending, well, and this is a conservative estimate I found on the web, more than $2 million on the project, and I understand it's far more than that. We track where we are with that project and explore what next with that process. Now, this is Ghana Connect. My name is Evans Mensah. Connecting the studio is Dr. Kojo Asante, Senior Research Fellow with the Center for Democratic Development, CDD. Doc, thank you for your time here on Ghana Connect.
Thank you.
Also connecting in the studio is private legal practitioner and teacher of law, Justice Srem-Sai. Hello, Justice. Thank you for joining us. We will be joined shortly in the studio by the Deputy Commissioner of the National Commission on Civic Education, Kathleen Adi, who will be here shortly as we begin to discuss these very important subjects. I want to start, Dr. Sante, on what we just heard from the General Secretary of the NDC. He seemed to suggest that the incumbent government have their own vigilante group, Invincible Forces. Nothing has happened to them in spite of all the criticism. So why shouldn't they also build their own vigilante groups? In fact, they have outlawed two, at least, recently in the internal elections.
Two new ones.
Two new ones. I think the Bulldogs and others. So is it justified in that logic?
No, of course not. We've actually created a monster that is going to swallow all of us if we continue the path. Actually, after the 2016 election, when CODEO did its stakeholder review, all the politicians in the room agreed that at some point, the vigilante group started to turn on them.
Okay. The parties themselves? The parties themselves.
Because there are so many dynamics around vigilante groups, and we'll probably have some time to explore that a little bit more. But some of them are personality driven.
Okay.
You know, so you played Mr. Azoka in the clip, but the Azoka boys and their rise in the NDC led to rewards for those who control the Azoka boys.
True.
So the rise of Mr. Azoka, for instance, is linked to that. So the fact that vigilantes are there's a reward for it. You're talking about the visible forces and so on. And it is very true that every time they come in with a new government, they are incorporated into the security services, which itself creates huge security problems for all of us, because it then is left to political manipulation. They are loyal to the individuals and not to the state. So you created this dynamic. Now, what you are doing is that more and more, now invisible forces, and so they all have actually chapters.
Yes.
They are creating some in Sunyani, creating some here, creating some there. And if you put that all in the mix of this huge unemployment problem, then you are creating a real chemical concoction which can explode at any time. Because all you need is a group of people. If they number almost 5,000 and one person or a couple of people are controlling them, they create a security problem for you. They are motivated, well built. The violence is a feature of their activities. They are funded, and so they are rewarded. So people see that as an avenue to also earn an income.
Yeah.
You know, but what the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Center has actually shown us is that there is actually a marketplace for violence in this country, which is seasonal. So at election time, it's vigilantes. Then when elections are over, it's land guards. And then, you know, some of them go into crime and so on. So there's always somebody there to pay for violence. And that is even much more dangerous mix. So the vigilante is just, how do you say, a symptom that you are seeing in just one pocket around elections. And that has its own history going back. I think you have to go back to Akwatia. I've forgotten whether it's 2004 or whatever, where there was that's when people actually brutalized each other. And from there, the trust between the parties and personalities got lost. And since then, we've been adding to more vigilante groups. They are getting even more and more violent, more intimidating. So even primaries, they are targeting personalities. So I don't think this is the kind of democracy we want to build, because that democracy won't take us anywhere, and it would not bring us development. And those vigilante groups themselves are not going to basically secure the benefits in the long term that they want.
Yeah, but Justice, there's an important point that, of course, when Asiru Nketia made these comments, it was heavily criticized. But some say, if you listen to his logic, he's simply trying to sort of play the devil's advocate, some have said, that if the incumbent government, you have the powers of the state at your disposal, and you have your own vigilante group accused of doing so many things, including invading a court and free people who are before a court of competent jurisdiction. And then we saw what happened down the line with the sort of judgment and, I guess, penalty they got. He says, if you watch that impunity, why should they sit back and not form one of their own? Because he says the first rule of nature is self-preservation. He hasn't got a point.
Within the context which you put it, he has a point. But do you realize, Evans, that political parties or opposition parties tend to use vigilante groups than the party in government? And that is because the party in government already has the security forces under its control. So I think the biggest problem here is the politicization of our security services. It appears that the police service, the military, seem to understand that, look, we are for the government. In other words, the party in government. So they do as the party may wish. And I'm using may because sometimes the party, the political party or the government itself need not direct a policeman or an IGP to do something in his favor. But the IGP and his men see themselves as the servants of the government, the party in government, than the servants of the constitution or the servants of the law. But what is strange now is the fact that now the government, after having control over the security services, which is cultural, it seems to have its own vigilante groups in addition. Some of them, as we know, who have been employed or recruited into the security forces. Now, then it becomes daunting for an opposition party to stand aloof and hope that something will happen. So within that context, it seems to make sense. But the whole idea of vigilantism should not be entertained in any serious society.
But we are entertaining it.
That is the challenge.
That's pretty much the challenge. And
let's look at the reason why vigilantism is even rising, apart from the economic situation, the hardship in the system, where young men after school are unemployed. Of course, if Evans, you and I, if we have decent jobs, really, you wouldn't like to be in this dangerous, risky business of being a vigilante. So apart from the economic issues, what actually comes is the lack of punishment and availability of reward. So not only are they being rewarded with recruitment to the formal security services, jobs, and even pocket money and all, but no one ever punishes some of these vigilante groups. And we have seen it a couple of times where courtrooms have been invaded. Of course, it is good to say we have taken them through the judicial process, but I mean, it is strange sometimes how the judicial process itself, resolve the issue. So until we probably put our feet down and decide that, look, whether be in government or out of government, this is dangerous because at the end of the day, as Dr. Santi put it, even these guys turn against their own party folks because sometimes the vigilante is not even sponsored by the party itself, but some rich individuals within the party. True. So Mr. A or Honorable A has about 5,000 vigilante group, Honorable B had. So should there be a context between Honorable A and Honorable B, even within the same political party, you realize that there will be clashes. And you call it internal, but they are all citizens, and the security situation is not improved by this kind of thing. So until we make it a point that as a people, we are going to put our feet down and root out this problem, 2020 will not be easy. Because as you can see, NDC has added how many? 2.
Yeah.
And it looks like
2 fresh vigilante
groups. It looks like there'll be more addition on both sides, and even the small parties are organizing. And that shows that the police service, the army, they are not doing their work, and they will find it very difficult to do their work going forward.
Yeah, but what do we do about it? I think the problem, we know what the problem is.
I think, so there are two ways. Where Mr. Siedu Ketia has a point is that the two parties, the two dominant parties, MPP and NDC, have to be involved in that solution. There has to be, a ceasefire and a disbanding of these groups. Now, there's the law enforcement side, you know, but what justice raises it's a real problem, because if you look at, we have had 3 alternations since 1993, and because of that level of alternation, you have completely created problems of professionalism for the police, because every time a new government comes, everybody wants to bring their own people there, including vigilante groups in the security services and so on and so forth. So it continues to erode the trust in the security services, which becomes important when elections are conducted. Now that they are formed, this is within party primaries, but it has its own personality issues. We haven't got into elections yet people are already forming. So you are looking at 2020 and saying, oh, I expect the police to be biased, and therefore I am protecting myself. That is already a recipe, you know, for violence for 2020. The police can basically disband these groups, because the Constitution is very clear. You have a right of association, but if it threatens national security, if it undermines the public safety and so on, those rights will be taken away from you. Yeah. And so there is no reason why the police, and we have seen it, these groups go and intimidate people at elections, whether it's primaries or whatever. So they are not, as they are characterized as youth groups, but they are not there to undertake activities as youth groups.
No.
So the police can disband them, but we know why the police wouldn't, because the government in power often interfere with the activities of the police, and the police people will tell you they will transfer you to some remote place as punishment if you don't take orders from political actors. So where should we start? And that's where I think then the parties, engaging the parties, is important. We can push the president.
Who will engage the parties?
Oh, we
civil society,
and you.
Okay.
What is it that you're going to force those of us who don't have a direct interest in having bodyguards, you know, protect us when we are going to campaign. We are thinking of the bigger Ghana, and the fact that as they go ahead to claim power, that they claim to want to come and serve us, and that they will do anything to get it. If we don't protect that, then, you know, you'll be sitting on the side and you have a problem on your hands. We have to take that responsibility and demand that if the president has the powers, the powers of the state, and if people are breaking laws, that they have to be held accountable. If he's not doing that, then what are there's either political consequences that you suffer for doing that, or we engage the parties that both of you have to disband.
Yeah. But it sounds simple.
Oh no!
But those calls have been made before, and the parties have dismissed it. In fact, the national security minister one time, in fact, the president himself, had on countless number of occasions said disband, IGP sanction, and immediately he says it the next day there's a bigger one. National security minister recently said we will have to disband. He admits it's complex, but it's not disbanded.
Do it by law. Do it by law. Proscribe.
You know, I think
these organizations.
The solution is difficult, but that is because of what, you know, the prisoners' dilemma.
Yeah.
Okay.
You are not sure if I disband,
you will disband
my
too.
other party. You know, so then that is the challenge. The long-term effects we already know, but the solution itself, from where I see it, I think is a question of the economic situation in the country.
Fundamentally.
Yeah, I mean, if you solve that, you'll be doing a great, you know, solution you'll be giving a great solution to a problem. But that is a long-term thing. You can't just wake up one morning and switch on the economic, you know, the green light, and it happens. So dialogue is the way for it. Like Dr. Santos said, dialogue. Let's get the parties to sit down. Let them be frank. So there should be a platform, and I think it's something that the Christian Council, civil society, all of us must be involved. Let's call the party leadership. Look, let's sit down and have a frank discussion about this, and ourselves come up with ways of you know, dealing with the situation. It is not something that the police can sit somewhere, because they themselves, they know the game, so they can't switch, they can't do anything. So we need to create that platform. But who's going to create it? I think we we, I mean, civil society, professional bodies, labor union, we can come together and say, look, this is not something that we can entertain anymore. Let's have a conference on this issue. Let's be frank, and let's discuss the ills and the advantages and the disadvantages. Then we'll be able to have a way forward. But if I tell you that we can sit here in this studio and say, let's do A, B, C, D, honestly, we can't, no one person can come up with a solution. It's an issue of trust. Whether you trust the system. And in any trust situation, you need people to talk, to have honest conversation about the problem. So I think that platform needs to be created first. Then we have a discussion on that.
I know Kudeo were already working to try to get a national security summit, because as I explained, the vigilantes is just part of a story.
Absolutely.
Of a real market for violence in this country.
Okay, and when forgive me, in fact, I just understand that we've just been joined by Samuel Wuku, who is a national organizer of the NPP. Until he was elected to that office, he was a national youth organizer of the party. And of course, a lot of these individuals directly came under him. Mr. Wuku, thank you for your time here on Ghana Connect.
Thank you for having me, Evans, and good evening to your cherished listeners and friends in the studio.
There is a united call in the last few days on the back of what Asidu Nketia had said, that it's time for the talk to end, for us to see action in disbanding these vigilante groups. Because NDC says they've introduced the Hawks and another group, and they're going to do even far more going into the 2020 elections because you haven't disbanded your own vigilante groups. Are we going to see a proper public disbanding, verifiable disbanding of the group that you have in your ranks?
Okay, let me take it from this. First of all, if the General Secretary for the opposition NDC did say that, that was unfortunate. Because you don't seek to cure a menace or a growing concern by also worsening the situation. For me as a former youth leader and working extensively with the youth across the continent, the youth can be constructive and destructive, depending on the leadership and depending on how you put your energies to use. My little understanding of this whole arrangement and menace is that when you have crime being perpetrated and there's no action being taken at the top, it reinforces that notion that you are supporting us and you are behind it. Unfortunately for our case, or fortunately for our case, the NPP government since last year, we haven't checked responsibility by being frontal in confronting these matters. So for the General Secretary for the NDC to come from that position, I think it's unfortunate. However, you and I will agree that it is something that we don't just have to nip it in the bud, but it's something that we have to totally abolish it, because it deepens our wars and also does not make our democracy look attractive. How do we go about this? My thinking is that my suggestion, and which I would suggest to both the new youth leader for the NPP and that of the leader who will emerge from the NDC's ranks as their new youth leader when they go to the poll. These two political parties, take it or leave it, they are the biggest culprits in terms of having many of the youth groups coming under their operation. And so if we're discussing these matters, we have to be dispassionate about it and not to also take a partisan position. If you have people in the past, look, where they committed crimes, whether at President Rawlings' time, at President Kufuor's time, under Mills' era, under Mohammed's era, and they went scot-free. Obviously, those similar youth groups under the NPP will believe that when they also commit some of these crimes, they must also go scot-free. But once we take a definitive position that, look, our laws must work, regardless of the colors you are wearing, and we should not be judged by the color you are wearing, but the content of the crime that is committed, will go a long way to help all of us. I will not also postulate or pretend that, these groups, whether we call them radical groups or so, do not exist under the NPP. We've had our own shared experiences in the past. But when I spoke to you sometime last year, October, when I was still youth leader, I did indicate that these are matters that for me as youth leader at that time, I was going to ensure that you do not have many of these things recurring or you hearing about these incidents. And I think by and large, it will be very fair to me, apart from the isolated case that you had in Tamale, maybe that one we did not show anybody, and also the boys arrested, and those that we even found, that there was one of them who was a member of our communications team was subsequently suspended. So when you have a political party taking such drastic measures to also ensure that we do not also have some of these groups destroying the image of the party and also the image of the country. Well, so while we are taking these steps, if you have the largest opposition party who brought about the democratization of violence, more or less, with the Azoka. Azoka existed before any other these radical groups also emerged. That was the first radical group to emerge from the ranks of a political party. And if you recall, under the days of Professor Mel, when the Yana murder came.
Yeah, I mean, but Sami, I get the history of these vigilante groups. But let me ask you a direct question. I guess that's where we are now. Will the NPP disband? And you admit they still exist, although in the last few months we haven't seen them as active, but and causing as much trouble as they did in the past. But question: will the NPP commit to disband?
So it's clear that the NPP leadership, from what you are saying, at least they've risen to the occasion.
Yeah.
And not just as you said.
My question, because I have, my question is, will you disband the group as it exists?
Well, it's just about the orientation, basically. I mean, if you just disband Group A and another Group B is formed with a similar orientation and the modus operandi, I mean, you just be back to square one. What do you have to do? Groups that operate under political parties. And for me now, as national organizer, the good news is that because of previous experiences as youth leader, now as national organizer, the youth wing, the women's wing, the national group, and these volunteer groups all operate under the national organizer as their boss. So with this experience that I have, what I will take, the steps I will take, will not be to just disband the group because there's a name. But what you have to do is to let them conform to the rules and regulations of the political party and also subject themselves to the rules of the country.
Okay.
And once they also do know that their activities have the propensity to bring the image of the political party that they profess to love down, they will also now begin to understand how some of these things work. And Evan, just finally, I mean, the youth basically is about making ends meet. And when you also let them know that you don't make ends meet by fighting a proxy or letting a big man hide behind you, you know, to commit unnecessary crimes that can get you into trouble. It's about the orientation.
Okay.
And being there for them, counseling them. So it's not just about disbanding. Disbanding will not solve the problem. Another group can be formed with the same modus operandi.
We will interrogate that. Let me bring in your colleague from the NDC, the national organizer of the NDC, Kofi Adams, is also on the line with us. Hello, Mr. Adams. Thank you for your time. Hello, Mr. Adams. Do we still have Mr. Adams on the line? Let's see if we can get him to. Okay, good. But Mr. Uku, I'm grateful that you joined us with those thoughts. But let me come back to my guest in the studio. He says the solution is not disbanding, but reorienting.
I disagree. Disbanding has its own effects. It is symbolic. You know, the substance of what you do matters, but the form also matters a lot. If you have invisible forces who are known for something, and your suggestion is that we won't disband invisible forces, but we will let them change their approach. How many people will know what this approach is and all that? So the first step is to disband. And once you disband and that serves a symbolic purpose, then you can now inculcate a different culture into a different, group. Why do we change names? Why do we sometimes close down institutions and form new ones? It's because they are known for some things and the culture is deeply instilled in them. And until you disband them to serve that symbolic, purpose, I mean, it will be, you may try or you can, but at the end of the day, they will still be there. But I think that the first thing that should happen, I think, is that, look, what we knew before 2017 is that opposition party, they make use of these vigilante groups. Once they come into government, they rely on the security services. But this is a unique one because it appears the government in power has the security and at the same time
maintaining
has
the
this.
vigilante
So then it's a different dynamic we are dealing with right now.
But it's just because it is one long story. You know, this is being, it's the same issue that it's solidifying and, you know, changing as we go along. So as he mentioned, for instance, there's a revenge element as part of this. The last time something happened, because a lot of it also involved violence, somebody got killed, they were not punished. The next time I get an opportunity, I want to take my revenge. And then the story goes on. Yeah. So you are gradually adding elements to it. So now you are in a point where you already anticipate that this is how you are, this is the way government is going to treat you come elections. And so you are preparing to face that. Yeah. And you think that the vigilante groups you have is not enough, that you need to form even more to counter this. Yeah. When we did the tour with Codeo in the 10 regions, there were places where some of the vigilante groups, and we interviewed some of them, they are just for hire.
I see.
They don't belong to any.
They don't have any loyalty to any.
And it's not even a party that has to. It can be a candidate that is contesting for an election. And that's why I'm saying that it is a bigger issue about the availability of these people and prepared to put their services to either create violence, whatever it is, for a pay. And for them, these kinds of loyalties
Evans,
are
I think there should be a slight distinction here.
Can you hold up for me for a second, because Kathleen Adi is connecting with us shortly in the studio. I'll come back, just hold a thought. Okay. And I'll also ask you what you make of the governing party's proposal that simply reorient them, don't disband. Let me take a few of your comments on our social media pages. Vigilantism has been highlighted by security analysts and experts as a major threat. And this is on our JoyNews Facebook page. Which challenges the developmental progress of the country. Let's pick your brain on what you've been telling us on our platform today. Of course, Ganri Mohammed says we should start by asking Akufo-Addo to apologize for his all die be die comment, and so people are already tracking back to then. Let's rearrest the invincible forces who broke into a high court room to free their fellows. Let's arrest Wontumi and Joseph Yamin for publicly endorsing and claiming ownership of invincible forces and the Hawks, respectively. Most importantly, let's provide jobs for these brutes. That's a comment there from on the social media. Excellency Tagar James says the best way to stop this so-called vigilantism is for the police officers to elect their own inspector general, so that they can get the courage to deal with them without any political interference. Otherwise, if politicians continue to appoint IGPs for the police service, it will become worse in the years to come. That's Excellency Tagar's comment there. Prince says, a good thing always advertise itself. I'm not going to talk much because actions speak louder than words. You can see the video below, and he attaches a video of what has happened in the past. And Midlove says, since when did you realize this? If you think because the biggest opposition have formed there so you can start this, you're non-fat, then I beg, of course. Now, but those are views, and it tells you that people have already taken entrenched positions on this matter. And as we go into 2020, and Dr. Kojo Asante has said, it's just a toxic, explosive mix. Once you form a vigilante group, assuming that the IGP actually decides to crack the whip and enforce the law and arrest people belonging to the Hawks, for example, of the NDC, can you imagine what will happen? Because the folks who are already entrenched NDC politically, of course, they will not allow that to pass, because they will point to, what have you done to the invincible forces? That's where we are. That's why this conversation is so important. Justice, you're making a point.
Yeah, it's a slight point to say that we need to distinguish between political party vigilante groups and the professional individuals or groups that you may hire. I think for those groups that you may hire, they've always been there. I mean, probably just like the political group, but if we don't make that distinction, we are likely to probably, miss the point. What we are addressing is how do we get political parties to stop this? First, we need to get them to stop. And then for those professional bodies...
The governing party says we won't stop, we'll reorient.
Yeah, but even that point, you see, and this is, as I said, there's empirical evidence that what we are seeing as political party vigilantes are people who change their identities depending on who hides them. So there are people who are hired and they are presented as political party vigilantes.
But they're actually not.
They are not. The members might even move to go and do something else. That person might find an IT job and leave and go. So there's that dynamic there that makes it difficult for you to say, okay, Azoka boys, right? They became identified as NDC security, the Invisible Forces, recent, and so on.
Now we have the Hawks.
Yeah. But those, as I said, those kinds of groups, yes, they be part of the party, but the dynamics even within the groups themselves makes it a very, very fluid process. So I find it difficult to say, okay, this is like accepted by the party as a group.
Yeah.
I think the reason why we need to make the distinction is that, you see, if we catch a common group of people who are common criminals and you are punishing them, we don't hear politicians going to defend them. We deal with them as they may be. But once they met the same person,
taking the political color,
then the issue becomes. So I think we need to make that distinction clear. Otherwise, then we will not be.
Yeah. Okay. Now you're listening to a special edition of Ghana Connect. It's brought to you by Star Ghana, and it's on Joy 99.7 FM and also on the JoyNews channel on Multi TV. My name is Evans Mensah. With me in the studio, and just connecting the studio with us is Kathleen Addy, the Deputy Commissioner at the NCCE. Kathleen, thank you very much for joining us. Also, you've been listening to Justice Srem-Sai, a legal practitioner, a teacher of the law, and Dr. Kojo Asante with the CDD. Kathleen, let me pick your thoughts on this. Just before you entered, we heard from the NPP, national organizer, because the consensus here is we need to disband. He says we can't disband, we need to reorient them and change the approach essentially. What's the NCC doing about it? It appears democracy itself is under threat.
Definitely, and when it comes to these vigilante groups, democracy is under threat. And NCC, for its part, we've issued press releases, not just for this last one, but we issued one last year as well, in 2017, when the government-affiliated vigilantes were also, all over the place. Essentially, this stuff is illegal. I mean, disbanding, reorienting. I say arrest them. We have to start doing the right thing in this country. When we continue to make excuses for the wrong thing will continue to persist. I think it's very simple. And if we don't make examples and start getting people to be responsible for their actions, we are heading into a really murky place. So from the point of view of the NCC, it's pretty simple. When people do the wrong thing, you need to arrest them. The law is supposed to be blind. Don't now say, well, this one is different, and it's not different. A crime is a crime, and that's the way we can move forward in this country. If we try to look at it in any other way, we are creating problems for ourselves. We are just moving the anarchy just further down the line, and it will come.
Somebody just sent us a message that I read, which says, you said the solution is arrest. But he says the problem, and I think Justice and Kojo also talked about this, is the credibility of the police institution itself. Because, and the suggestion was, because the political heads, the president appoints the IGP and has a hand in appointing who is the CDS, etc., and now the other security agencies, they then feel their loyalty is to the government in power and not necessarily to the Constitution. And so, although they know they have to arrest, and it's amazing, the current president, on many occasions was on radio and publicly saying, arrest and prosecute. Yet, nobody's arrested and prosecuted. In fact, the only case that they attempted to prosecute, we all know how it ended. And so even the judiciary itself sometimes is blamed for this. There's a whole big problem there.
Well, that's really what the problem is. I mean, if nobody's willing to stand up, then what are we going to do? We say that the strongest pillar of our elections, of our democracy, is elections. But we have also identified that what happens between elections actually is what is our biggest weakness. And this is one of those things.
So between elections, we recruit thugs.
You see, between elections,
Yeah.
what you do in a democracy is that you strengthen your institutions. You understand?
True.
And if you refuse to do that, then you are not moving forward. You are not practicing democracy as you are, making noise about it all over the place. The institutions, you see, somebody needs to push the envelope. So an IGP needs to say that, in spite of all of this, I'm doing this because this is the right thing to do. Push it and let somebody come and say that because of that, you're no longer IGP. And you will see how suddenly things will shift. You understand? Because everybody wants the right thing to be done. And I'm completely convinced that if you push it, people will think twice before they push back.
Who will push?
You're the professional. You're the one sitting in the institution. Absolutely.
Okay.
Do your job.
But can he when he's appointed by the president?
Why not? Tell me why not.
Can he push against invisible forces when he's appointed by the president?
You have the power of the state. We hide you with our taxes to take care of our security. Yeah. Go out there and do your job. Just do it. Do it and let's see what the consequences are. Let's see if truly a politician in this country will get up and say that we are removing the IGP because you arrested wrongdoers. I doubt that very much.
I'm just, one example is the national security representative who was manhandled in was it Ashanti region?
Ashanti region.
When you have witnessed that, when you're a police officer or a security officer and you witness that, so there's a lot of realities when you talk to them.
Yeah.
They
tell you that what they have
reality
examples
that you actually get punished.
Yeah,
so
the system punishes.
The question is, as you're saying, who is the brave person that is going to put their head out
Somebody
there?
has to be bold.
Because every time they put their, it gets cut off.
But there's a reason why you're a policeman. I'm sorry. I did not join the police force. I'm not that brave.
I won't individualize the solution. I won't say.
You want to take the institutional approach?
Yeah, the institutional approach. I think all of us should come on board and have
society,
discussion.
citizens.
Yeah, because if you say IGP should act, you will not
because
get
and that is the thing. It starts, the police command structure in particular. That's where the weakness is.
Yes.
Well, it's supposed to be the strength, but it's the weakness because once you can interfere from there, everybody else, follows.
Because they pick the signal, right?
Yes, that this is
so,
what,
so
I think the dialogue...
Before we move on to the CRC, should we change the way we appoint our security heads? Because the Constitution says the president does the appointment.
It's not for me to say. I can only support what the Constitution says.
Yeah.
All I know is that once you have a job to do, you do it.
Okay, regardless of who appointed you.
Regardless of who appointed you.
Okay, that's an interesting one.
Yes, that's what I
think. The reality is very different. Yeah. Anyway, but that.
No, but you see, this reality is an excuse.
Yeah.
This reality is an excuse. We need heroes. We need heroes.
Well, he's standing up to exactly. That's a good example.
But we need heroes in this country. Somebody needs to stand up for something.
Independence, right?
Yeah. He's fighting the president's appointee. Yeah. Okay. So watch how that
He's also a presidential appointee, isn't he?
He's the only, I guess, carry on from John Mahama into this government. He's the only one of them. I mean, carry-ons. I mean, rarely that happens. Rarely in our history you have that where a previous government will appoint somebody essentially like that, and a new government will keep him.
So what does that tell you? It means that small steps are being taken.
True, absolutely. Well, let's see. But that leads us into our next conversation, because as we talk about whether or not, because if you want to change who appoints the IGP, you must review the Constitution. Yes. Because the president has all these powers that he can do anything, appoints everybody and anything, including DCEs, and even now there's just a struggle whether to elect the DCEs. The MPP promised to do it, but they keep shifting the timelines. And so it brings us to the constitutional review process. Justice, you were with the CRC, correct? You were with the CRC. How much did it cost us?
$2.7 million. That's on record. Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Okay, but so why haven't we heard anything? There was a white paper. That's the last I heard of it. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then we're supposed to. The government said we accepted a few things. We reject a few things. The next process was to see which ones go to Parliament when Parliament can do, and which ones go to referendum. But the process seemed to have vanished.
Okay, let me try and update. Yeah. So after the white paper, government actually accepted about 99% and rejected about 1%. After that, there was a Constitution Review Implementation Committee. The CREC was formed with Professor Ivio Danko as the chairperson. And CREC's mandate was to carry through the actual amendment process in accordance with Article 25. 25 is where the actual steps for amendment. So CREC prepared 2 different bills, one for the non-entrenched provisions and another for the entrenched ones. It was at that point that the process was challenged by Professor Kwikwa Sari in the Supreme Court, saying that basically saying that the process shouldn't have been led by the executive, but it should have been a parliamentary, process. The court disagreed with him, so ordinarily the process should have continued. But 2 things happened. After the case, it was clear that the government, election was approaching, so then you need to, and this amendment process, you need to have a lot of time to carry it through. There appeared not to be consensus between majority and the minority. So then the government slowed down. Getting to the election, one of the provisions was put before Parliament for amendment. That is the one that would change the date of election.
Yes, I know.
And that needed two-third majority of Parliament, and it was shut down by the minority then now, by the NPP, for so many reasons. That was the last time anything happened about the process.
We haven't revisited.
We haven't revisited. And even beyond that, civil society has been working. For example, the IEA, which has been working on this winner-takes-all project, have been discussing and trying to get the Constitution amendment process through, but with a slightly different approach. Apart from that, the Institute of Law and Public Affairs also held a conference forming a coalition in November last year with about 10 civil society organizations coming together. They have written to the Attorney General, Parliament, and also Cabinet, specifically saying that, look, let's get this through. Even if we can't get all, let's do something about it. We can't leave this thing to die. Since then, I'm informed that there has not been any reply from any of these institutions. So in terms of civil society activism, there's been work going on. What is lacking is government, involvement.
I think fair to say, Kojo, that it's not on government's agenda.
No, my sense from the president, I think this CSO president meetings that we had in 2017, his view was that the number of changes that were required, you might as well just have a new constitution. So it's either you basically present a new constitution, because even trying to table that in a referendum is quite a difficult task. So that's more of a practical issue. But certainly there's not been an appetite for taking this entire process forward. We cannot cure presidential imperialism, which I think is a fundamental problem of the Constitution, if we don't go back to the constitutional review. It's the only process that can alleviate the challenges that we have. Whether it's the IGP, and if you want to go the Kenya way, and get, I think, supermajority interviews, people can apply, and so on and so forth. You are not going to do that if you don't change the Constitution. So I think we are in a very interesting place, because I do accept the practical problems of presenting what the CRC did, in a referendum. I mean, there's so many things you have to vote for, yes or no, or even some you might need variations in order to achieve your objective. So we have to look at that, and it might be that you need a new constitution.
Wow.
Well, which is not too far away. It's not too far away from what the CRC had done. Basically, you have to present it as a new constitution, like 1992. Present it and let people vote for it.
Sorry, let me hear from Kathy briefly.
The consultations were extensive enough. I don't know if you remember. A lot of consultation was done. NCC was involved in that. And it really went down to basic, even to the communities. So essentially, and when we are out there, people do ask that what happened
all
to
the work that you did.
Yes, people do ask because it was really engaged. People were really engaged with the process. Ordinary Ghanaians were engaged with it. People went to the community centers, wherever these things were being held, and put their views across. And they really did expect that something would come out of it. And all the time when we are out there, people do ask that, so what happened to the constitutional review process? If what you're saying is what needs to be done, whatever the case may be, it needs to move forward. We need a few steps.
But it's been a few years now that we haven't even started anything at all.
I think there's a bit of difficulty in presenting a new constitution because if we have a challenge with people voting yes or no for maybe 537 amendments, you can imagine the challenge that will come up with 290 new provisions in a new constitution. We would have the same, even a bigger challenge. So I would think that we should probably stagger. Because
so what, you
a lot
do
of work,
a referendum this year, you do one next year?
Yeah, it's possible because you see, let me explain. Let me explain why.
Please.
When you look at the work that CRC has done, like NCC is affirming, it's a thorough work. I doubt if you can do it another way. Now, what we can do, the report is there and the recommendations are there. So I think every political party that can should look at the document, the report, and pick what it thinks it has to do. And you can, 3 principles can guide you. I think one of the biggest challenges we have with the process was inclusivity. It appears the executive was leading the process and Parliament was on the sideline. Now, you can include Parliament or bring all the arms of government and civil society together, and then the political party, and then so that's the inclusivity. Now we can look at political will. Of course, the parties may disagree on some of the provisions. What you can do is that, okay, if you are interested in maybe you want to leave a legacy, maybe yours is to say that we are going to amend the constitution so the president doesn't have to appoint the ministers from Parliament. You can, based on your political will and your interest, you can table that for and then run it. So by the end of maybe 2 or 3, 8 years, we would have had a few of the things done, and as we go, because I mean it's a living document. We can't just say that we have to change the entire. We have to do it bit by bit if that's the way to go. I think that is.
You endorse that.
Completely. And I've always, highlighted this stagger approach, and I like the way he's, aligned it with some principles, because the thing is bulky, and we all know that realistically, to vote yes and no on so many issues at the same time, it's not realistic.
In a country where majority
it's not realistic. So pick a few, or group them, or let's agree to some grouping. So let both sides or all the stakeholders agree that we will group them based on similarity of issues, and then take them in chunks.
And I think the president's initial proposal actually kind of was around this stagger. So the election of MMDC,
which is part of it.
Part of the
Article 108, which was to give Parliament the power of the purse, and then some of us were like, okay, then look at Article 88 as well, which gives exclusive authority to the AG and so on. So it could be like you can take a group of provisions and which is easier than to be able to
fantastic proposals that had come forward, but we cannot sit by and $2.7 million go waste, and that's why
and even more.
Even more.
The 2.7 is what CRC has spent as an institution. How about the chiefs and the people, the time they spend and all that?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely,
a huge amount of money.
So
and civil society budget that supported the whole
core
process.
around the table that we need to revisit. It has to come on the agenda. It has to be on the agenda. If we can't do everything in bulk, stagger it. I mean, if you're a political party that believes in a part of it, you get that out of the way. Let the NDC come and also decide, okay, we also like this part. In fact, they commissioned it and they issued a white paper. So they have to, that's exactly. So thank you very much for connecting with us on Ghana Connect today. My guest has been Kathleen Adi, the Deputy Commissioner of the NCCE, Justice Srem-Sai, a legal practitioner, and Dr. Kojo Asante with the CDD. My name is Evans. Let's connect again next week. Yes. Oh, no, I'm in traffic.